Hi everyone, and thanks for joining us today for the next Vera webcast on closing the content security gap. My name is Grant Shirk. I'm the head of product marketing here at Vera, and I'm joined by my colleague Veliz.
Hello, good morning, everyone.
She's a product marketing manager on our team. And what we're going to do today is talk through some really interesting dynamics that we're seeing in the world of data security and some of the really interesting security gaps that our customers and some of the other companies that we talk to are seeing, particularly around their content. Before we get started, I wanted to give you a little bit of housekeeping for what we're going to do today. We would love to be answering your questions as we go and at the end. To get those to us, your best bet is going to be the chat box in the lower left-hand corner of your webinar user experience, the webinar console. Put those in there. We'll get them answered as they come up if it's relevant. If not, we'll hold them till the end, so please stick around for that. And we do want to hear your questions. Make sure this is as valuable as possible to you. Also, if you have any technical challenges or technical difficulties, also use the chat box, and the operator or one of our moderators will be there to help you out. All right, great. So here's what we're going to talk about today. We've got 4 key items on the agenda. We'll get through these in an amusing and rapid pace, but hopefully this is something that is useful to you and to your team. First thing we're going to do is go through 4 ways that your company and your team is potentially losing confidential data. We'll talk about why those exist, where they come from, and also some ideas for trying to tackle those. Second, we'll look at some of the existing technology that your team may have either recently implemented or is evaluating at the same time. Things like a cloud access security broker, a CASB, DLP, and simple encryption, and why those aren't quite enough to close these gaps. Third, we'll pivot to a data-centric strategy, look at different ways that by focusing differently on the data you're trying to protect, how you can close these gaps in your organization. And then finally, Veliz is going to walk us through a lot of these topics kind of in action so you can see these things in practice. All right, here we go. So the first thing we really want to touch on is what is this problem and where does it come from? And I think it's really instructive to look at how businesses, whether it's yours or others, protecting information. And a lot of that is built on this concept of infrastructure. It is an ever more complex series of walls and structures and boundaries that we've either built thicker, higher, or stronger over time. This made a ton of sense back when we got started. We were working, if you really go back to the mainframe model, we had a single access point, we had a single network, and only a few accounts who had privileged access. It itself was controlled citadel. There was really only one way in, there was one way out, and it was relatively easy to defend. However, as we move forward into the client-server model, and even now while we're with a cloud infrastructure world, that perimeter has steadily and progressively expanded. As we've added new systems, new capabilities, new connections, and even new devices, the ability to protect all of that information has become dramatically more challenging. And particularly as we went cloud, that perimeter is no longer a perimeter. We have this constellation of network access points and devices that we have to manage. So as we struggle to keep up with this rate of change, as we've added complexity into the ecosystem and the technology ecosystem around our businesses, we've tried to add to the castle walls. We've built new towers, ramifications, moats around the outside, trying to keep good data in and bad people out at the end of the day. And we've brought in a lot of different technology to do that. So whether you look at firewalls, DLP, mobile device management, or CASBs, they're all different variations on this wall concept, trying to keep that information inside. So we've done a great job at building this infrastructure. You know, we're monitoring traffic that's traveling back and forth across the border. We've put nets and guards and sentries in place to check information that's traveling back and forth across those walls. But unfortunately, it hasn't really changed the picture. It's still very, very easy for data to be created outside of that wall, to sneak out a back door, whether intentionally or unintentionally. And generally, really just slip outside of our ability to see it, control it, and manage it. I think that the numbers really don't lie here. If we look at some recent reports from Gartner and from others, we see a range on these estimates, but at the low end, Gartner has estimated that businesses spent over $75 billion on enterprise security last year, and that number is probably going to increase 30 to 40% year over year for the next 5 or 6 years. And with that amount of spend, though, something is clearly not working. The number of data breaches that we've all been personally involved in, we've all gotten those letters from a financial services company or a hospital that says, oh, you were part of a breach. That's accelerating. It's not decelerating. So something is clearly going wrong. And that's kind of the core of our thesis, is that we've built these walls, we've built these boundaries, and we've been so focused on protecting the infrastructure that we've lost sight of the information. And so what we see is that information is starting to sneak out through 4 very specific and actually fairly measurable gaps. And what we're going to do is go through each of those and talk about those 4 gaps, these different ways that critical data is leaving your information, and then start talking about different ways that we can address that in your organization.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. So Grant, we've spent a couple weeks, months actually, speaking with leading CIOs, CISOs, really doing very in-depth industry research. And what it all comes down to is these kind of 4 major blind spots that are common across every industry and every company. And these are 4 gaps exactly where sensitive data is slipping through the cracks, even though these most companies have layers and layers and layers of strong, high, tall walls. Data is leaving, and so what I'll do is I'll go through the 4 major gaps that we tend to see. So the first one is what we call the behavior gap, and this is really when none of your employees use the security tools that you've invested in. And right, so a lot of security leaders invest in, let's say, DLP, data loss prevention tools. You've invested in the sanction sync and share. But your employees want to work the way they want to work, right? They want to bring their own tools to work. They want to use the tools that they love, that makes them feel the most productive. And so they bring these tools, data leaks, and you're on the hook. And this can happen in a couple ways. We see employees putting sensitive files on a USB drive so that they can work from another device. Or we see them kind of bypassing the secure FTP server and mailing themselves attachments so that they can work with them on their own personal devices. Or they copy and paste data from a secured file into an unsecured document for convenience. So this gap really is about your employees wanting to use their own resources and data slipping because your tools don't cover them. So the second gap that we see is the visibility gap. And I would say this is one of the most common and most concerning gaps, which is the inability to see where, when, or how your data is being used. So it's a major blind spot because you can't see things that happen outside your control. And so let's say your team is sending out investor communications to people outside your company, lawyers, auditors, third parties, and you can't see how or what they're doing with your information. So if your compliance team were to ask you, hey Grant, has information been disclosed prematurely? Or who's accessing the investor comms we just sent out? You don't know. And so really the visibility gap is kind of everything that you can't see and everything that happens outside your control. And what you don't know can hurt you, and we see that a lot, right? If your data is regulated, you're still responsible for it, even when you can't see it. So the third gap is this control gap, which is the it's basically a lot of security teams can't pull back information after it leaves their control. So once information is out, once your crown jewels are out of the castle, once you've shared them with other people, you can't correct for mistakes if anything were to ever happen accidentally or even maliciously. So there's an important distinction to be made here, right? So you control a lot of things. You control access to logins and to applications with identity and access management. You can monitor cloud traffic and access to cloud-based resources with CASBs. You can scan every file that leaves your network with DLP. But you can't control information after it leaves and after it's opened and downloaded by your external parties. And this is really when data is at its most vulnerable moment. It's when people have your information in their hands, and that's really when most companies lose control. So the final gap we see is the response time gap. And this is really the time lag between the time a risky behavior is introduced at your organization and the time it takes to correct for it. So this is a situation where your security systems can only protect certain types of data. But a new application is introduced, like let's say Slack or the new venture-funded app that you may not be aware of yet. So that creates a time lag for you to detect and correct it, and data slips through the cracks. And so kind of those four gaps kind of show us a crucial thing, which is that we can't continue doing more of the same things. We've been building a lot of layers. We've been securing the infrastructure, and as Grant mentioned, we've been neglecting the data. So if the information is what we hope to protect, why not secure it directly? And that's really our thesis and why we founded Vera.
Yeah, I think this is where it starts to get interesting, because it's very clear that despite the investments that we've made, as we spoke at the top, these gaps, if anything, are getting wider. And so simply doing more of the same thing that we've done in the past is not going to address them. And I think there's really four key aspects of a security solution that you really need to close these four gaps. And we can look at a couple of these according to this framework, but at the right-hand side here, you'll see if you're going to protect data, and you're going to protect data most importantly while it's being used, not when it's in cold storage or as it's passing through the network, but truly as it's being collaborated on, you've got to be able to do four things. First, you've got to be able to secure any kind of information. It can't just be Office files or PDFs. It can't just be specific applications. You really have to be able to apply this level of protection to anything. Second, you've got to do it in a way that gives employees that flexibility to share and collaborate any way they want. That right there is really going to be critical to closing the behavior gap. Third, as a security and IT team, you need that auditability and visibility into every access to information, whether it's happening on your network, by one of your employees, or by someone completely external to your organization. You can't lose that. And then finally, you need the dynamic ability to change how this information behaves at any time. It's not a set it and forget it kind of thing. Policies change, usage changes. And so if you can address all four of these with a solution, you're really going to go a long way towards closing these gaps. So if you look at something that is perimeter-based or wall-based like DLP, you can see how it kind of fails against these four areas. Certainly, they do a great job at monitoring and filtering traffic on the way outbound across your firewall. And they can provide you some reasonable statistics about where information is traveling to. Unfortunately, once the data crosses the border, if it's let through, because it's kind of fuzzy logic, it's not perfectly deterministic, you can't control it anymore. You can't see it anymore. It's the functional equivalent of waving a cheery farewell to your information on the way out the door. And additionally, DLPs were built for an on-premises world. They don't really deal with cloud services or information created outside of your organization in the first place. So still a valuable protection, but in many cases, they're not going to give you that data-centric security that you really need. Now there's kind of a new class of perimeter solution, the CASBs, or the Cloud Access Security Brokers. And they've taken the very important step to extending or including a lot of these cloud platforms in their security. So they're monitoring traffic, and this is nice, back and forth between cloud-based resources and your network. I like to think of it as they protect you against the devils that you do know. So if you've sanctioned services, you have a CRM service and a collaboration service and a human resources management service in the network, they're going to manage traffic to and from that and hopefully gate people to their correct places. But once someone's made an approved connection, they've put information out there, and someone from outside of the organization, approved or otherwise, has accessed that data, they've let go of it. Their hands are off. And so they're not really tracking that information through the last mile. And in many cases, depending on how they're implemented, they're actually locking down on employee choice. So they're going to find ways around the CASB. Now, those are both perimeter-based approaches. If you take a more data-centric or even if you simplify file-centric approach to this, you can really hit all four of these key areas. And you want to think about the entire life cycle of data from the moment it's created to the moment it's shared to when it's consumed and used by people inside and outside of your organization. And that's the approach that Vera and the advantage that Vera gives our customers. Whether you're in financial services or healthcare or manufacturing and engineering or even media and entertainment dealing with really rich assets, really sensitive IP and data, we can protect that information, any kind of file, allow you to share it however you need to get your job done, and then still give the IT and security team that full visibility and audit history of that data. And even more valuable, I could send Veliz a file today and I could change her rights or revoke access to it 6 weeks from now, 6 months from now, or a year from now, and never really lose my ability to control that information. And that's what we mean when we start talking about data-centric security. When you can do those things, those four things, you can really cut down on those four security gaps around behavior, visibility, control, and your time to react.
Great, and Grant, what I'd love to do is actually show how Vera and a data-centric solution like ours can help you close those security gaps.
Let's do it.
Great. So what I'll do is I'm going to tackle the four gaps that I kind of went through earlier and show you how Vera helps you address each and every one of these. So the first gap we talked about was the behavior gap, right? Employees wanting to use their own tools. Well, when you adopt a data-centric solution, it doesn't matter what tools your employees choose or want to use, because when you secure the data, anywhere it moves, anywhere it's stored, that security is going to go with it. So what I'm looking at right now is a folder in Dropbox that's been pre-secured with Vera, and I'm going to go and click a file. It's a trademark agreement. I used to be a lawyer, so I used to deal with a lot of these types of agreements. And what you'll notice is a couple things. One, it opened in its native application, so it's a Word file, so it opened up in Word. It was the same Dropbox experience, but you'll notice this Vera policy bar on the lower right-hand side, which is going to inform your business users what their rights are with the document. So even though your business users are using the tools that they want, perhaps it's Dropbox, you're gonna retain control, and you're gonna be able to retain security as your team uses sensitive agreements like a trademark contract. So hovering over the Vera policy bar, you can see that edit is disabled. I can't save a copy of the file. I can't print, and these are all policies and rights that are completely customizable. So let's say, if I click out of the document, and I'm going to move the document out of Dropbox, you'll notice that the security traveled with the file. And so that's what's amazing about a data-centric solution, is that those permissions are going to stick to the file anywhere it goes. So if it's Dropbox, if they want to work from their desktop, if they want to use another type of collaboration platform, your security is going to always remain with the file. So that addresses the behavioral gaps. You can let your employees use the tools that they want. The second gap we talked about was that visibility gap, right? I can't see who, how, and where my data is being accessed. So through the Vera dashboard, this is our admin portal. This is where our security leaders live and breathe with Vera. You can get full visibility over who is accessing your information. So I'm looking at that same trademark agreement, and in the Vera dashboard, I get a lot of data. So I can see how many times that file has been accessed. It's been opened 5 times. I can see everyone in my organization that has access to this file. No one else can open this file. So if I were to forward this file to a third-party contractor that's not on this list, that person would not be able to open the file unless the file owner or the IT admin granted him access. You can also get a full activity log for that file, so I can see that Grant opened the file on July 1st. I can see a couple policies have been changed on the file, and I can also see where in the world it's been accessed. So kind of going back to that question, if your compliance team asks you, hey, who has access? You can just print out a very simple report on the file, or everything that lives in Vera is automatically kind of pushed to our audit log, which can also be exported to your SIM tool or a BI engine for more granular and detailed reporting.
I think there's something in here that it's really, really critical, is that because this solution is based on identity, and it's based on kind of that whitelist or VIP list model, is you have the confidence that only people who've been explicitly given access to this information can have access to this information. So you no longer have to worry about if and when it leaves the organization, because you know that only people who can prove that they have the rights to the document can open it, which is incredibly comforting and incredibly powerful when it comes to closing content security gaps.
That's right. And the other benefit of being able to see is that when you can see, you can also make decisions, and you can decide, if anything were to change, if you're no longer working with someone at your company, or the attorney that was working on that trademark agreement is no longer advising your firm, Vera is going to give you the tools to take back control over your information. And so with one click, you can immediately change people's permissions or just revoke access to data on its own. So I'm actually going to show how that works. So if I'm looking at, I'm in an admin view, so if Veliz were no longer to work at Vera, I can immediately, at the click of a button, revoke her access. And what's really great about how Vera addresses this control gap, Vera's not going to force you to lock down the entire file. Everyone else on this list still has access. It's letting me be very, very granular and specific in who I want to revoke or change access to. So let's go back to that file. I actually removed it from that secured Vera folder in Dropbox. And if I go to click on it, Vera is going to say, hey, you no longer have access to this file. Do you want to request access? And so just like that, you are retaining control of your information anywhere it goes. So the last gap we talked about was the response time gap, right? And this is when a new application is introduced into your company, and it takes you time to respond. So one of the benefits of a data-centric solution is that you can protect data across all applications, across all platforms. And so I'm going to kind of show you that in action. So at Vera, we use Slack all the time. I think we're in Slack all day. It's kind of our internal communications tool. We also share sensitive documents through Slack. And so what we've done is we can, anytime you upload a file into our secure messaging channel, it's going to be automatically secured with Vera. And so what that means is that everyone in the secure messaging channel is going to be able to access it. No one else is going to be able to access it unless they request that access. And I'm going to be able to see it and control it anywhere it goes.
Right. So what happened there in the background is the Vera bot that we built identified that an unsecure file was uploaded into what's essentially a public channel, identified it, pulled it out, secured it with Vera, and reposted it. And now if Veliz goes in and accesses that file, she's going to get the secure version of it, making sure that only secure content is being posted and leaving the organization. When you have the ability to address the data, it makes it much easier to close any of those potential gaps around content. Okay, so I think that closes the demo. Is there anything else you wanted to show today?
No, let's open it up to questions. I'm already seeing a few that have come in, so I will let me sort through them, and we can get started. Okay, so first one is very easy. Can I get a recording of this webinar? Absolutely. We will be this webinar is live, but we're recording it, and we'll be sure to send it out via email in the next couple days.
Also, probably a good time to let everyone know that we'll also be sending out, along with this afterwards, a copy of our definitive guide to data security, which goes deeper into a lot of these topics and stats and information, and hopefully something you can share with the rest of your organization.
So second question, Grant, that I'm seeing is, how did you integrate Vera into Slack?
Right. So we talked about what Vera was doing in that situation, but not how we did it. A few months ago, we formally launched the platform components of Vera. So the ability to use Vera through a REST API or an embeddable SDK that allows you to add Vera data security capabilities into absolutely any application. So we built the Vera Slack bot based on top of that, but we also have customers who've built Vera into their internal engineering document management systems and their internal email application workflows and even some of their compliance applications to make sure that all the information that is flowing through their organization is protected with Vera, but that also these applications have access to it as they go. Really expanding Vera as a platform to add really rights management and encryption and data security as a service to any app.
Yeah, and I think what's great about the SDK is that it does the work for you in the background. So it's enabling companies to automatically secure data that's generated from homegrown applications like design applications and more.
All right, well, let's see. All right, please, here's one for you. So, all right, you talked about CASB and DLP, but how is Vera different from DRM?
Yeah, that's a question. It's a great question. We get that all the time. So we are different from DRM in a few ways. So one, DRM is pretty much limited to securing certain file types. It can only secure Office files or PDFs. It's very limiting from a data perspective in that way. The second, and I think the most kind of critical way, is that it's going to force your employees it's going to force them to do things that they don't want to do. So it requires a client installation on all ends. So if I were to send Grant a file that's a secure file, if he doesn't have my same DRM tool, Grant is going to have to download an agent, or he's going to have to sign up for a special account. And so what really that encourages employee workarounds. And so with Vera, we don't force anyone to download a client or an agent to view and access secured files, which makes security a lot more scalable. And DRM also doesn't work across all applications and all platforms, all devices. Vera provides a consistent experience throughout. And so that's how Slack is possible, right? Because we're a very, very flexible solution that can be weaved into any of the applications and tools that you use.
Okay, do we have any more today, or is it about time to
There's one more.
Okay.
Yep. So out of all these gaps, which one is the most common?
Oh, that's a good one. Why don't we each take a shot at that one? Which one do you think?
So I definitely think the visibility gap is the most common. It's most when I speak to customers or people evaluating Vera, it's the concern that they flag the most, which is, I don't know where my data is, and I don't know. I worry about my data ending up in a competitor's hands, or an employee taking data with them to their next company. And so I can't, the inability to see is really concerning. So I think for me, it's the most common because it's the one I hear the most.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's definitely one that has the most common, the common denominator across all the organizations we talk to. The other one I see that is less simple, but also pervasive, is the behavior gap. And it just tends to be different from company to company, which behaviors are existing, because it's largely driven by what your existing IT looks like. But people, by and large, are driven and motivated to do the job, get the work done, and they're going to do what they can to do the right thing by the company, but they're not necessarily going to do it exactly the way that you want them to. And so oftentimes the behavior gap is toughest to diagnose, because you're trying to prove the negative. You're trying to show where people are doing things that they shouldn't, but they're doing things that you by nature cannot see. So I guess maybe it's what you had to say. It's that visibility gap. I can't always tell what people are doing and where they're doing it.
Yeah. Anyways, thank you so much for joining us today, everyone. We really appreciate it. We've actually compiled not only information on all these gaps, but how to detect and evaluate whether you even have these gaps, and of course more information about a data-centric strategy in our new, freshly released definitive guide to data security. We're really excited about it. And if you were one of the first 100 registrants, you will get that as a complimentary asset. So thank you again. My email is veliz@vera.com. Grant's is just grant@vera.com. And we will see you hopefully again soon online.
Thanks for joining, everyone.